Hi people! In this video I'm going to talk about Frost Resistance gear for Naxxramas. My aim with this video is to give you all the information you need before you start making your decisions about what Frost Resistance pieces you will be going for. Basically, all the information I present within this video can be found in the Naxx Resistance channel on my Discord server. I'll link to that in the description below. The first thing I will talk about are the Frost Resistance requirements. We got these numbers from talking to members of the Swedish guild Regimentet who've cleared Naxxramas on several private servers. Of course, not the perfect source, but much better than just randomly throwing out numbers. Now, I could just slam together a list of pre-Naxxramas best in slot Frost gear for each class, but the thing is that for several reasons you might not want to farm almost any Frost Resistance gear at all before Naxxramas. I'm gonna have to explain a few things before it might become clear why, but bear with me. So first of all, something kinda obvious. When you gather your Frost Resistance gear, it's not only a matter of getting as much Frost Resistance as possible, you don't want to sacrifice all your other stats just to reach a really high Frost Resistance. And the best way to reach a high resistance without sacrificing everything else is by gathering the epic Frost Resistance gear connected to Naxxramas. You might be worried that you won't have enough Frost gear before it's time for Saffron if you don't farm a set beforehand, but keep in mind that this raid is supposed to be the hardest raid in Classic, and you will have to defeat 13 other bosses before you even need your Frost Resistance gear. For most guilds, this will likely take quite a few lockouts, and what that means is that by the time you actually reach Saffron, you might have replaced a lot of your Frost Resistance gear already. So instead of going after the pre-Naxxramas best in slot Frost Resistance gear, you might want to instead farm the materials required for crafting the epic Frost Resistance pieces coming with the Naxxramas. And to be honest, if you didn't already know everything I said in this video, you most likely aren't one of the guilds that are gonna make it to Saffron in week 1. But I might be wrong, it wouldn't be the first time. Now, the epic gear. Each player will have access to a total of 4 crafted epic pieces, another 2 pieces obtained from quests, and 2 pieces which are dropped inside Naxxramas. There are a few off pieces inside Naxxramas as well, such as a trinket and a necklace. Probably some others I missed as well. Anyway, in order to craft your epic Frost Resistance gear, you need a number of materials. Almost all of them are things you can farm already. Check the Discord channel for a summary of required items. The one thing you can't farm at the moment are the frozen runes, which seems to be obtained partly from trash inside Naxxramas and also from the containers with the same name. In order to open these containers, you need a word of thawing, which drops from the trash inside Naxxramas. Just a quick note here. Just because you play, for example, a druid doesn't necessarily mean that you want the letter resistance gear. Take a look at each set available to you and decide which set has the proper stats for you. Now, because the frozen runes drops from trash, you can basically farm them indefinitely. Like the reputation runs people did inside Solgrub in early phase 4. Go in, kill all the trash that you can, open the frozen rune containers that you have access to, go out and reset, and repeat. And maybe you get a lucky epic drop from the trash while doing so. Now the thing is that you're going to need a lot of frozen runes, not only for the Frost Resistance gear, but also for letting people obtain their tier 3 pieces. If you'd like to know what type of materials you need to gather for your tier 3 besides the materials gathered inside Naxxramas, check out my video on that topic. You might have to decide whether you will use the first runes for tier 3 or for the Frost Resistance gear. Note that you might need to have 8 warriors with 4 pieces of tier 3 each in order to get past the 4 horsemen. You might also be able to use the trinket from Solgrub for that extra spell hit, but that's a whole other discussion. Regardless of how you decide to spend the runes, the first 120 runes that you do use for Frost Resistance gear should be used for the epic ring and epic legs for all the raiders. In total, each raider will need 3 runes, 2 for the legs and 1 for the ring. On top of that, you will need 3 blue sapphires, 2 essences of water and 1 arcanite bar. Both are rewarded from quests accessible pretty early. In order to unlock the legs, You have to be attuned and then complete the quest Echoes of War, which only requires you to kill some trash mobs inside Naxxramas. That will also unlock the quest The Only Song I Know, which allows you to pick up your legs if you provide the correct materials. The leggings have 40 Frost Resistance. Once you've completed Echoes of War, you can also pick up the quest The Fate of Ramaladni, farm some trash until the right item drops, turn in the quest and then get access to Ramaladni's Icy Grasp, where you turn in the right materials for a ring with 25 Frost Resistance. And Ramaladni is Endalamar backwards, by the way. These two pieces alone will provide you with 65 Frost Resistance. However, you can also enchant the legs with Ice Guard, giving them another 10 Frost Resistance. In order to obtain this enchant, you need 10 Scarlet Insignias and 30 gold. It's basically like the quests in Silithus. The next thing I would recommend your guild to spend the Frozen Runes on are the gloves from the epic sets. Although the cheapest epic piece in terms of Frozen Runes are the bracers, the gloves have a higher Frost Resistance to Frozen Rune ratio and are simply more efficient. They give a total of 30 Frost Resistance. If you play a healer, you've now gathered all the Frost Resistance you will likely need. Note that all healers should get the cloth gloves as they actually give some spell power, unlike the leather, mail or plate gloves. Next up, I'd either recommend getting the chest pieces for the casters and melee DPS, as the chest has the highest Frost Resistance to Rune ratio. You might however decide to go for bracers instead, as you can finish more of them quicker. The head and shoulder pieces of all the epic Frost Resistance sets drops from 4 bosses inside Naxxramas. The cloth and leather head drops from Gothic the Harvester, the cloth and mail shoulders drops from Grobulus, the leather and plate shoulders drops from Grand Widow Ferelina, and the mail and plate head drops from Hegan the Unclean. If you won't be able to get more than a few bosses for the first few resets, I'd recommend you to prioritize these 4 bosses. There are a few other bosses also dropping Frost Resistance gear, but only these 4 bosses can drop 2 pieces each, and hence have the highest chance of giving your guild Frost Resistance pieces. It's a long-term investment basically, so that when you finally come to Saffron, you're ready to take him on. Although, if you would want to do any other priority when it comes to the bosses, that's of course perfectly fine. So, to give you a summary of everything I just said. Because the epic Frost Resistance gear is so much better than any pre-Naxxramas pieces you can get, I'd say that it's just more efficient to farm the required materials for these pieces now instead of farming any Frost Resistance gear. And when Naxxramas opens, you spend a lot of time grinding the Frozen Runes and craft the epic Frost Resistance gear. Be aware that you might not want to go for plate simply because you are a warrior DPS. Like I said before, check which pieces that are best for you stat-wise, regardless of whether they're mail, plate or leather or cloth. Now, despite everything I just said, there are still some pieces you can obtain before Naxxramas that could be worth it. Some items I would recommend players to get before Naxxramas is the following. The Ice Reflector Trinket if you're an engineer, 1 or 2 for 15 resistance each. The Ice Cloak, crafted by a tailor for 11 resistance. This can also be enchanted with another +5 resistance. The cloak is very cheap to make and the receipt is either bought from Michi Ems in South Shore or Gokra in Dustdweller Marsh. For Horde at least, the receipt seems to have a 10-minute respawn timer or so. I was there for 20 minutes and picked up 2 of them. All casters should get the Banshee Finger from the Baroness in Stratholm Undead for another 10 Frost Resistance. When it comes to the remaining pieces, I'd recommend just clicking these links in the Discord. They will take you to all currently obtainable pieces with Frost Resistance. Remember that you as a warrior can use plate, mail, leather and cloth. Do note that this does not include the items which might randomly roll Frost Resistance. Therefore, I have included the 2 items that I could find like this in separate links. Next up, we move on to relevant things which are not gear. The Ice Guard, which I talked about before, is a nice enchant that you can apply to a head and a leg slot. Make sure that it will be to your epic Frost Resistance pieces and not to your main gear, both giving 10 extra resistance each. The Argent Dawn has a +5 Frost Resistance enchant you could add to your shoulders. and add that to your epic frost resistance shoulders. I don't think you want to replace your Sulgrub enchant. Finally, make sure to slam +5 resistance on your cloak as well. As for consumables, there are basically two interesting ones. The first one is of course the Greater Frost Resistance potion. The second one is the Greater Magic Resistance potion, giving you another 50 resistance to all School of Magic for 3 minutes. This one does not stack with other buffs giving you resistance, such as the Paladin or Shaman's Totem or Aura. But if you're not in a group with a Paladin or a Shaman, having this potion would be nice. I'd recommend you pop the Frost Resistance potion a while before the fight, and then use the Resistance potion right as the fight begins. They share a 2-minute cooldown. And so, there we go. What you should do now is decide as a guild whether you want players to farm a full resistance set before Naxxramas, or if they should farm the materials for the epic frost resistance pieces, and then you farm the frozen runes once Naxxramas opens up. Check which epic sets you would prefer and look at the stats, not the armor type. All healers should go for cloth pieces, for example. If you have any questions, maybe the answer can be found in the Naxx Resistance channel on my Discord, or you could just ask me on the Discord. Anyway, that was all from me. I hope you found this helpful. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did. I stream every now and then on twitch.tv/NeceriumClouds. Feel free to come in and say hi, looking forward to meeting you. Anyway, that was all for now. I'll be back soon with another video. Until then, see ya!